national television yesterday, Dick Cheney's daughter was asked whether her father, as vice president, had U.S. officers torture prisoners to make them support his lie that Iraq had ties to al-Qaeda. Our third story tonight, she did not answer it. She did not deny it. Liz Cheney, a veteran of the Bush State Department herself, was asked about last week's report that in 2003 her father, Vice President Cheney, suggested that American interrogators waterboarded a detainee in Iraq, specifically about Mr. Cheney's fondest hope to tie Iraq somehow to 9/11. As you will hear, his daughter does not deny this.
The report, though, that the Vice President's office did ask specifically to have information about Iraq al-Qaeda connections presented to this detainee. Do you deny that?
I think that it's important for us to have all the facts out.
She did not go on to deny it. And evidence continues to mount that Mr. Cheney did, in fact, use torture to twist detainees into mouthing his lie, perhaps even chose torture because it makes captives lie. McClatchy newspapers today quoting the retired Army colonel who oversaw Guantanamo's Criminal Investigation Task Force from 2002 up through 2005 as confirming that in late 2002 and early 2003, intelligence operatives there had been charged with finding links between al-Qaeda and Iraq. An unnamed former U.S. intelligence officer telling McClatchy it was Cheney's office and Defense Secretary Rumsfeld's demanding that information in that time frame when they were trying to build public support for invading Iraq. According to early 2004, Mr. Cheney himself said, quote, "The links go back. We know, for example, from interrogating detainees in Guantanamo that al-Qaeda sent individuals to Baghdad to be trained." After 5 years without a shred of evidence to support that claim, a Cheney spokesperson now says the former vice president will clarify those remarks later this week. But his daughter was not done, because President Obama has not yet granted blanket sweeping immunity to her father and other Bush officials for something she herself cannot deny. Ms. Cheney attacked the president for daring to keep open the possibility of the rule of law.
He comes in and he says, listen, we're going to prosecute potentially people who worked in the Bush administration who worked very hard to keep the nation safe. Now, in my view, that's un-American.
Joining us tonight, Jonathan Landay, the McClatchy national security and intelligence correspondent behind the story we have just cited. Thanks again for your time tonight, sir.
My pleasure.
The picture that seems to be emerging with greater frequency, the details are coming now, that Bush officials and Cheney and Rumsfeld used torture to help try to manufacture this link between Iraq and al-Qaeda. How sharp is the focus on that picture right now?
Look, we don't know. We're missing a piece here, but what we do know is that there was pressure on interrogators at Guantanamo to come up with that information. We know that 2 of the detainees in the CIA custody were asked those questions, and both, that would be Abu Zubaydah and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, said there was no connection. And we also know that a 3rd detainee, who Egyptians for allegedly torture, manufactured that connection. We also know, as you pointed out, that Mr. Cheney himself, in an interview in 2004, said they were getting information from detainees at Guantanamo about this alleged biological weapons and chemical weapons training that al-Qaeda operatives received from Iraq. So you've got to put the 2 sides together. Pressure to obtain this information coming at a time when these interrogation techniques were being authorized. There's some pieces missing, but it's looking awfully close.
What does it say, do you think, that Liz Cheney in that interview did not simply reply, of course my father never used any kind of interrogation to get anyone to say anything that wasn't true?
Well, here's the thing. They were talking specifically about waterboarding. Let's not forget, there was an entire menu of these kind of interrogation techniques that had been authorized by the President of the United States. The worst, of course, it seems, being waterboarding. But there were other techniques: sleep deprivation, forced nudity, forced grooming, other kinds of stress, long-term stress positions. So we don't know which one of these techniques were used, whether they were or not, on these detainees who were asked about this. But as we've heard, waterboarding came out over the weekend. Waterboarding was not. Okay, but we don't know what was.
Do we know, looking ahead, this statement from the Cheney spokesperson, that he's going to clarify that one remark in particular later in the week that we know, for example, from interrogating detainees in Guantanamo, that al-Qaeda sent individuals to Baghdad to be trained? Is he speaking out yet again on this subject?
Well, it'll be very interesting, Keith, to find out. He's giving a speech, I believe, on Thursday morning at the American Enterprise Institute, where a lot of the original push for the invasion of Iraq came from. And it'll be very interesting to hear what the former vice president has to say. Another really interesting aspect of all of this is that here you have the vice president, the former vice president, pushing this idea that there was an al-Qaeda Iraq link when the CIA was telling him repeatedly that there wasn't, and yet this administration was willing to, the former administration was willing to accept the CIA when it came to weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, it's. I suspect that speech might be, the title might be, Mr. Cheney will be speaking on prophecy self-fulfillment. But let me switch topics here. The ease with which the daughter of the previous vice president can go on national television and call the actions of the current president un-American, it is kind of remarkable that as late as 2.5 years ago, anybody who criticized or even disagreed with the actions of the then president were described as the modern-day equivalents of Nazi appeasers and suffering from moral or ethical confusion. There's some, I may be overstating this, but there seems to be some double standard between what was acceptable about the previous administration and what is acceptable in terms of criticism about this one.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on, what possessed Liz Cheney to say that. You know, I'm not inside her head, and I don't want to be there, obviously. But I think this idea of calling people un-American is simply political grandstanding. You know, let's get the facts out. The fact is, the idea of getting facts out, the idea of accountability, the idea of holding people accountable for actions that may have been illegal, I can't think of anything more American.
And to that point, Nancy Pelosi is still under wide fire today from Republicans who claim that she knew all along about something they insist was okay. How is the effort going on their behalf to prioritize that sideshow at the expense of the issue of finding out who authorized the thing that Ms. Pelosi is accused of knowing about?
Well, for me as a journalist, I keep asking, well, why are they continuing to bang this drum as hard as they're banging it? I want to know, is there something else here? Are they, in fact, is this a deliberate effort to try and divert the nation's attention away from these very pertinent questions, the need to get to the very bottom of what happened? Why is this drum continuing to be beaten? I can't answer that, but I would like to know.
Jonathan Landay with McClatchy Newspapers, drawing the line at an appropriate spot, I suppose, there. Thank you kindly for your time, sir.
My pleasure.